Yeah, so this is number 4, the Pac-Man ghost. This ghost is the pathogen. We want to kill this, okay? And these little lightning bolts are what your antibodies do to kill it. And beside right next to each of them, there's like little bits of definition. So I'm going to zoom into different portions of this worksheet, and you can kind of, follow along that way because you can't really see too well. So the first way your antibodies attack a pathogen, come here, is localized change. What is a localized change? What is change? Well, infection, yeah, but it's not called inflammation. Yeah. So inflammation, that is a local change. Local meaning, at a certain area. It doesn't spread. Fever would be systematic. Local is inflammation. So restricts the spreading of an infection by walling off the infection site. So I know I drew this last week, but I'm going to draw it again. When you have so this is your vein or your artery, right? Or whatever it is. You get stabbed or something happens, and you get an infection. I don't know, knife. It's pretty jagged. It looks kind of painful. So you get an infection, and we don't really want that. So what happens is that your vessel will kind of pinch right here. It'll kind of pinch and wall. That's what walling off is. It is walling off the infection site. So your blood is flowing this way, and when you have that walling off, it prevents that infection from spreading. It prevents that pathogen from getting to the rest of your body. So that's the first step. When you get infected, you get that walling off of the infection site. IgE, antibodies, so now that's important to know for localized change, attach to the antigens and stimulate mast cells and basophils to secrete heparin, histamine, and serotonin. So IgE also is an allergic response, but it's also localized change. So IgE, this lightning bolt represents IgE. So you got IgE. IgE will then go to your basophils and secrete heparin and histamine and serotonin, and this causes vasodilation and edema. So you have this walled off infection site, but then this portion of your vessel will vasodilate. It'll get bigger because you're trying to increase the amount of immune cells. These are little Pac-Men. Does that make sense? So that's why you have that dilation. And then you also have edema, which is when this dilates and you have blood pooling. That's called like edema when it kind of swells up. See, because it's walled off and you're just, increasing in size. So with heparin and histamine, right? We're going to talk about allergic reactions later on. But heparin and histamine help with allergic reactions because they vasodilate your blood vessels. And that's actually how people die of anaphylactic reactions, right? They vasodilate and their blood pressure drops. And if you don't have blood pressure, well, you don't have a beating heart. So your IgE, those are the same things. Your IgE, your basophils, your mast cells that work in anaphylactic reactions also do localized change. So they do two things. Does that make sense? And so yeah, the vasodilation and edema then leads to inflammation. Any questions on localized change? No? Okay. Antibodies also work by just directly attacking. So we were talking about humoral immunity. You get that direct attack. It directly goes up and stab, 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 stab. That's what your antibodies do. And there's 3 ways of direct attack. You could have neutralization, precipitation, or agglutination. So your antibodies either neutralize, which is binding and covering the toxic portions of the antigen. So you may still have the antigen, you may still have the virus, but what your antibodies do is they kind of give me a hug. And they kind of surround it. It's now you can't proliferate. So That's pretty nice. We like that. It's directly attacking. Precipitation is when they form an insoluble antigen-antibody complex. So this is when precipitation is when the antibody goes onto so you have your this is your pathogen, these are your antigens. Precipitation happens when your antibody directly attaches to this antigen site, and it kind of like covers it, and it binds, it forms an antigen-antibody complex, and it just prevents it from spreading. So it's like stop. So it kind of like, I like to think about this in terms of, like you see in those like cartoons, like water comes up through like the canoe, and people put like a piece of gum there. Yeah, that's what your bee does. Your antibodies do with precipitation. They kind of like put the piece of gum, and it's like, okay, now you can't sink our boat or do anything. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but the last one we have agglutination, and this is clumping of antibodies. So this is when your antibodies just are like, they're just like covering it. So basically, the way your antibodies come up directly attacking it is, they either form a coat. They either cover the toxic portions, they either form a complex, or they just clump up around it.
They're not destroying it, they're just preventing it from...
Yeah, prevent it from doing anything. So it's not like that's kind of misleading, direct attack. But the thing that directly attacks them now are your... Yeah, which ones? Which T cells?
The killer cells.
Cytotoxic, yep. Your natural killer cells in your innate immune response does that too. They do naturally kill things, but for this purpose, we're just going to say cytotoxic. The really insane, Dr. Poison. So that's direct attack. Any questions on those? Okay. So last week we went over complement. That's activation of complement enzyme. So complement is innate. We all have complement. However, the activation of it is an antibody action. So complement is a group of inactive enzymes. So they're inactive, they don't do anything until they're contacted with IgM or IgG. So in this lightning bolt, the actual antibody, because that's the lightning bolt is the antibody, the actual antibody that kills the pathogen is IgM and IgG. So your military and your government. That's what activates it. It's like, okay, everyone, let's start doing things. So I know we went over this last week, but I'm just going to go over complement enzyme again because we're right here, and here it is. So agglutination, kind of like with direct attack, it agglutinates on the antigens. Lysis, complement enzyme can like cut the membranes of foreign molecules. Opsonization coats the antigen-antibody complex. So over here we had we had direct attack, we had precipitation coating the antigen-antibody complex. Opsonization is going to then coat it. It's going to then like add another layer just to make it more like attack this. So it all kind of works together. With the immune system, sometimes the extremes that it goes is kind of dramatic, or because, better safe than sorry. So that's why there's a lot of like repetition with a lot of these functions. Alteration, complement enzyme also changes the molecular structure of viruses and makes them less harmless. So this is like if you're on the battlefield and all these viruses are coming at you with like swords and stuff, complement enzyme kind of is like, I want this one, give me that. And it takes away their defenses. It makes them less harmful. It doesn't kill the virus, but it's like, okay, playtime's over. It alters the structure. And then chemotaxis is the attraction of neutrophils and macrophages to the infected area. So your complement enzyme is also activated with chemotaxis. So just say you get, you hit or you get stabbed, your tissue says, help me. That's chemotaxis. That message then goes out, and then your neutrophils and your macrophages are like, okay, now we need to go like take care of business. I know I went through that really fast, but any questions on complement enzyme? Again, complement is innate, but the activation of it is specific, our antibody. You got it okay? Did I not make it a matching? Oh my gosh, I need to do that. I'm sorry. Okay, so if you flip to the back portion of it, I have just, little definitions. What are the three ways antibodies react to antigens? Well, you have local change, right? We have our inflammation with IgE, and histamine, and, oh God, what's the other one? Yeah, heparin, yeah. That's with your local change, thank you. You have direct attack, which is with your precipitation, agglutination, and what's the other one? You can look. Neutralization, right? We want to neutralize the threat. And then you have complement enzyme, which is innate. The enzymes are innate, but the antibody activates it. The specific immunity activates it. So how many forms of local changes are there? Only one. That was inflammation. You filled that out. How many forms of direct attack are there? There were 3. We did the matching for that. And then how many forms of complement enzyme on there? And there are 5. So it's kind of like the odd numbers, right? 1, 3, 5. So for me, it helps me a lot when I think of terms in numbers, like, okay, how many of these do I need to know? So that really helps me a lot. I don't know if that would help you, but that's that. Oh, yeah, no. And then what is the most effective, not make anything up. What is the most effective type of antibody action? Activation of complement enzyme. So again, your innate immunity, everyone has complement enzyme, but the activation of it, now that's specific. That's something your body learns to do. Yeah, to make more of it. It's like, hey, you need to do your job. So that concludes worksheet number 5. Any questions on antibodies or the way they work? That's why they're important.